Hello, welcome again to Books on World Mythology. Today we're going to talk about the mythology of Japan. To start with, I've mentioned this series before. It's Library of the World's Myths and Legends. It's a good series because they're great survey books. They tell you a little bit about everything, all the major stories, and uh, little bits of translation, some scholarly opinions, and amazing illustrations. This particular one on Japan, on Japanese mythology, is by Juliet Piggott, and what I really liked about this book, there was a lot I liked about this book. They talk about the mythology and legends and ghost stories and monsters, but I really like the monsters. There's just something really weird about the monsters of Japan. Like for example, there's this guy here, this crazy monkey fish-like creature with a depression on the top of his head. That's called a kappa, and they have this bad habit of sucking blood through your asshole. So if you find somebody dead, drowned with a distended anus, it's because he was attacked by a kappa. This guy here is called an oni. That's a type of horned demon. They also talk of another creature, a bird man called the tengu, and they have a habit of playing nasty tricks on humans. But if they like you, they'll teach you how to fight, like sword fights. So, great book to start with. Moving on to another general survey book, and again, many times in these videos, I have these old classic surveys. Many of them are published by Dover, and this one is called Myths and Legends of Japan. And the author of this one is F. Handland Davis. And it's got 32 illustrations. And again, this book has many myths and legends and ghost stories. I remember something about the ghost stories in here as being really cool. The Japanese are amazing when it comes to ghost stories. You're familiar with that, with The Ring and The Grudge and stuff like that. Okay, another really good general survey book. Now, getting to the source material, there's two main books that are basically make up a large part of Japanese mythology. At least when you talk about, there's many stories, there's epics, there's folk tales, there's legends, but when it comes to the myths of the gods and goddesses and the creation of the world and all the stuff we associated with mythology, there's two main books. The first one, that's a little older of the two, is this one here. It's called the Kojiki, and it means records of ancient matters. And this translation is a very old classic translation by Basil Chamberlain, and again it tells creation of the world and the early gods that came down from heaven and created the islands of Japan. And what's really frustrating though about this particular edition is that I bought this many years ago. There weren't many things to choose from. There was no internet back then, so it wasn't like I could go scouting for all kinds of other books. But what's frustrating about this edition is that the translator Chamberlain, even though he was a great scholar and they say he taught Japanese to the Japanese, when it comes to world mythology, if you familiarize yourself with it, you realize that a lot of stories could be a little rude and crude and sexual and naughty and scatological. And I think that might have bothered him a little bit because the naughty parts in here, instead of translating it into English, he translated it into Latin. So if you're like me and you don't have a high Oxford or Cambridge education and you don't really know that much about Latin, you're going to have trouble understanding parts of this book. I got by from getting the information elsewhere, but it's kind of annoying. However, recently, several months ago, I checked on my Kindle, and there is a more modern translation, which I'm sure does not have any Latin in it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. So anyway, but this is the one I'm showing you because this is the one I happen to have on hand, and it's the one I read. What's really great about the Kojiki is as you read it, you realize that what happens is that the emperor at the time demanded that this book be written. And there's a little bit of the divine right of kings, at least in my opinion, because what happens is that it kind of demonstrates the rightful emperor and his family as chosen by the sun goddess Amaterasu, because there's a portion of this where the part of the story is that there was this hero, the storm god named Susanoo, and he battles a dragon and he finds the sword in his tail, and somehow the sword winds up into heaven, and later on in the story, the sun goddess, gives the sword to the rightful emperor of Japan, and there is a sword somewhere in a shrine in Japan that is supposedly the Kusanagi, or representation of it. And if that name Kusanagi sounds very familiar, because that's the name of the sword, Kusanagi sword, it's because I believe Ghost in the Shell, the main character, is Lieutenant Kusanagi, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so the other book is actually written a little later, and it's called the Nihongi, Nihongi. It's also known as the Nihon Shoki. I'm a little embarrassed I didn't read it yet. I read the Kojiki many years ago, and the reason why I've taken so long to finally read the Nihongi is because from the little I read about the Nihongi and about it, it's supposedly a lot of the stories are the same between the Kojiki and the Nihongi. But the Nihongi, the stories are longer, more fleshed out. So I've been holding off reading it since I read the Kojiki. But the Kojiki, I understand that it's seen for many years it was seen as I think a little more sacred. Supposedly, the ancient religion of Japan, Shinto, is based on the Kojiki. Now, another book that has to do with part of the legends of getting a little away from the gods and moving into heroes is basically this story. It's called the 47 Ronin Story. I came across the story in general books on Japanese mythology, and but then I was happy that I found this in an actual bookstore. It's a little more fleshed out. This particular version is by John Allyn, and tell you the truth, I don't know how highly regarded this version is. I bought it many years ago. Maybe there's better ones, but I really liked it. It's very easy to read, and it's a great story. Basically, Ronin are masterless samurai. Supposedly, samurai is supposed to have a master, and that a master that employs them, and they're called samurai when they have a master. And in this story, the master was forced to commit seppuku, suicide, because he was dishonored. And so it's a revenge story, because the samurai, who now become Ronin because they lost their master, they plot revenge against the evil person that caused their master to commit seppuku. So maybe there's other versions of the Ronin now out there, but this is the one I read by John Allyn, and it's a very good story. Now, I'm going to mention just one more book. I like epic literature. As a means of conveying mythology or legends. A lot of nations have great epics, and Greece has the Iliad, Germany has the Song of the Nibelungs, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, and there is a tale that is a contender, or I don't know if it's one of the contenders or the main book that is considered the great epic of Japan, and it's called The Tale of the Heike. I downloaded a full version of it, but I took a shortcut and I read a shorter version of it, which is portions of The Tale of the Heike, because it's a pretty long book. The full version is The Tale of the Heike. I read, I chickened out, and I read. If you're a little intimidated by the length of the book, I read I don't know if you can see it. It's called I don't know, can't quite make it out. It's called the Tales of the Heike, plural tales, because instead of the full length tale, it takes portions of the Heike and gives you the best parts of the story, and so it's Tales of the Heike. If you can't read it, Heike is H. See, can you see it? It's well, whatever. It's Heike. This particular translation is by Burton Watson, Watson. Watson, Burton Watson, and I got it off Kindle. So if you look for Tales of the Heike by Burton Watson, you're going to get this really great book. It's not that long, and it intrigued me so much that I'd like to eventually read the full length version, The Tale of the Heike, which is also available digitally. You could download it on Kindle, and. It's basically the story. The Heike is another term for the clan known as Tyra, and it's about their great war with the other clan known as Minamoto, also known as Genji. And basically, it's about that. But the long tale has several shorter tales within it, and so it makes for a great riveting read. So that's all I have to say about Japanese myth and legend. Until next time, happy reading.